do the same.
All right, instant audit this morning. James Frischling is with us, president of New Oak Capital. Good to have you, James. Thanks for coming in so early. Appreciate it. What do you think of all this regulation talk?
Well, I think it's going to happen. And,
got to deal with it, right?
You have to deal with it. I think there's going to be a lot of time for, there's going to be a lot of blame to go around, and I think at the end of the day, the system needs to be addressed. To a certain extent, unfortunately, it didn't work the way people had expected it to. And with that in mind, I think they need to take a very active measure, because at the end of the day, if we're going to try to repair the financial system and restore trust and confidence, it's going to have to take a serious measure to bring that kind of stuff back.
What do you think about the Federal Reserve's quote-unquote new role as a systematic risk regulator?
At the end of the day, if there are going to be institutions that are too big to fail,
is the Fed the right one?
I would bet on the Fed for that one. I think having had the privilege of traveling a little bit and meeting with a number of investors who are on the sidelines with a wealth of cash, on the one hand, I think the experience, not to go back to the AIG story, but I think the experience of watching Congress and laws and taxes get enacted in response to the public outlash or backlash, I think at the end of the day, that is more fearful, or people are more nervous about that type of regulation than they are about the Fed stepping in.
All right, some people come in, we have a number of guests, Wall Street-related guests mostly, that say, you know what, no regulation. We don't want any of this. This is too much. You're shaking your head, and you've been making the case, which I think is interesting this morning, that we need to get this done. So it sounds to me like you want the rules to be set, and then we can all play by the same rules.
I think that's exactly right. I think as long as the rules are set, as long as people feel they're not going to change, at least in some narrow degree.
But why were you shaking your head about the idea that so many of your colleagues say we don't want any of this regulation?
Because I just think that's an unlikely and just not a realistic scenario. I think right now we are dealing with a forest fire that needs to be contained, and I think to a certain extent, despite the unintended consequences, I think the governments globally are doing a pretty good job of averting what would be an otherwise far more catastrophic scenario. But again, there are unintended consequences. Right. But it's not going to happen without. You're not going to have it's not going to happen without regulation stepping in to try to at least prevent this from happening again.
Really quick here, you focus on different debt spaces, residential, commercial, corporate, and consumer assets, all very exposed during this recession and very exposed to regulation. What area do you think you would see the most changes in based on the type of regulation we see?
Great question. I think at New Oak Capital, we focus on three areas. One is advising clients with risk. Another one is the execution. So on the broker-dealer side, I think you're going to see a high degree of scrutiny. At the end of the day, I think skin in the game. I think if in securitizations, the idea that risk was being moved and that all these bankers were in the moving business, not the storage business, I think one of the regulations you're going to see is oversight and, again, skin in the game on a forward-looking basis.
Dealing with realities. We appreciate that. Yeah. All right, now to the other big issue of the week besides regulation here in the United States, and that would be health care. There's a new analysis that came out last night from the Congressional Budget Office. Squawk about health care. James Frischling is our guest this morning from New Oak, and Charles Payne is with us as well. The president is saying himself that this plan is going to cost $1 trillion, but it was very interesting, guys, to see the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, come out with their estimates last night, specifically on the proposals been out there from Senator Kennedy, saying it's going to cost $1 trillion, but it's not going to cover everybody. Right. What do you think, James? Higher taxes is the reality here?
I think that is the reality. And at the end of the day, I think President Obama is taking a page out of public speaking rules. He's telling people what he's about to do. He's now going to do that. And then he's going to go back and tell people what he just did. And this was a big part of his campaign. I think people have questioned whether he can handle all of these things at once, all the challenges, but he's clearly saying this is something he's committed to and it's going to happen. Step
by step, and we should be prepared for it. To that, the politics are very interesting, Charles. I'm going to bring up on the screen what Peter Orszag, the president's budget director, has written in the Financial Times about this. Orszag saying, as he made clear in his speech to the American Medical Association on Monday, Mr. Obama is firmly committed to making health care reform deficit neutral over the next decade, using real savings or revenue proposals that can be scored by the Congressional Budget Office. The offsets are not theoretical. They're specific proposals determined by outside, impartial arbiters, such as the CBO, to cut spending, or you say, raise revenue. Right. So they're admitting that they're going to go down that line, but isn't it ironic to say, so James, what assumptions do you make about this, either as a citizen or as an investor? Is it universal health care at the end of the day, just an overarching plan there, or some watered-down version of that, do you think?
Probably a hybrid between the two, something close to a universal health plan, but not all the way. I think President Obama is popular enough and absolutely persuasive enough to push this issue as far as anyone's ever pushed it before.
He's as persuasive as Charles, almost.
Almost.
All right, guys. Thanks, James. Great to have you this morning.
Thanks
for coming in from New Oak Partners, and Charles, as always. Appreciate that. All right, that does it for us here at Fox Business Morning.